Are you serious? The Black Horseman is galloping in Greece? What? Are you serious? Unfortunately, I am very serious. The Black Horseman of the Apocalypse is galloping through the streets of Athens, Greece, as we speak, as thousands of protesters come upon a city absolutely sweltering in anger at the fact that the new austerity bill, which had to be and was approved, has angered the population. And I don't blame the population, because it was the corrupt government, the constant taxation without proper representation, and the robbing and the stealing and the skimming and the cleaning up off the top, and then pushing out someday somebody's got to pay the piper, and borrowing. Well, folks, the piper's done being, you've played, it's time for him to dance. And he's taking it from the poor. I'm Paul Begley. Matter of fact, I've got an article here. Violence that's erupted in Greece, being reported by Reuters, is right now unbelievable. Let me read right now. Greece swept rocks and broken glass from off the streets of Athens on Monday, today, on this February 13, 2012, after a night of violence that gave lawmakers a taste of a challenge they face in implementing a deeply unpopular austerity bill demanded by the country's foreign leaders. You see, firefighters doused the smoldering remains of several buildings. I understand 34 actually in downtown Greece were destroyed. They were set ablaze by hooded youths during protests against the package of pay pensions and job cuts adopted by Parliament on Sunday after 10 hours of debate. You see, Greece has unfortunately for the poor people, they've been led down a utopia society belief, which is a real liberal ideology that you can retire at 50 and everything's going to be paid for, and your college education will be paid for, and everything's going to be fine. And people retire early and sit around and sip on wine. The problem is, to fund that, someone's got to be working to fund that. When the population changed, they ended up with 53% of the people in Greece don't work. When 53% of a country's on the pension and the other 47% are trying to support them, it's not going to work. It won't add up. And even then, it might have had a chance of working, except the corruption in high places. Folks, what's happening in Greece right now is going to continue to spread across Europe and then to America. And it's not because Paul Begley wants it to happen. It's because the Bible prophesied that the Black Horseman of the Apocalypse, that has to deal with the balance and the scale of economy, would come crashing down. Meanwhile, so are the other three horsemen. The horseman of war is roaring through the Middle East, trying to suck everybody in to the conflict which is brewing, the real conflict between Iran and Israel. There's so much to talk about, but let's go back here quickly. The bill was the price of 130 billion euros. That's equivalent to 172 billion EU IMF bailout to save Greece from a chaotic default. You're not saving Greece. You're putting a Band-Aid on Greece to hold a little longer. The inevitable is still coming. Bankruptcy for an entire nation, and then nations, and then the world. And at that point, the world's going to realize we need to start over with a new currency. And you've already begun to hear the echoes of that coming from Pope Benedict XVI, who's been saying maybe we need a new currency. But when you start a new currency, that means the guys who have a lot are going to lose it, and those who have nothing are going to get some. And that is going to take a mastermind to pull that together. Are we talking Antichrist here? This is from my book, The Hosea Prophecy. When I wrote this last fall, it was based on the fact that you got all these birds falling out of the sky everywhere, all over the world. All these fish washed up by the millions on the banks all over all 7 continents, and cattle falling dead. 212 cattle in Stockton, Wisconsin, in a dairy farm in one night. That got national attention. But did you know 7,000 buffalo died in 3 days in Vietnam, and 10,000 head of cattle in Laos, Cambodia, and South Korea, and tens of thousands of cattle died in Russia? And then we've had all the whales, the dolphins, the millions and millions, 2 million fish on the banks of Chesapeake Bay, Maryland, and 7 million in Redondo Beach, California. Well, there's a reason for this. And before you start saying pollution, and some of it's from pollution, but very little, most of it is because of the prophecy of Hosea. Because there's no truth, there's no mercy, and there's no knowledge of God in the land. And because of the swearing, the lying, the killing, and the stealing and committing adultery. Let's focus on stealing a minute. God said that the cattle were going to fall. The beasts of the field would die. The fowls would fall from the heavens, and the fish of the sea, yea, would be taken away. He said it. He meant it. And we're seeing it in these end-time apocalyptic events. Now let me read to you something. Here's what I wrote in my book, The Hosea Prophecy, in chapter 10. I'll just jump in here. Bernie Madoff stole $60 billion over a 20-year period with a Ponzi scheme. Mr. Ponzi had done the same thing 80 years prior. But Madoff took the concept to the 9th degree. When the stock market started losing money and the Wall Street bankers needed to get their hands on some of their capital, the truth of Bernie Madoff was brought to light. Madoff had spent billions on living large, and now it was time to pay the piper. The fraud was exposed, and thousands of people lost billions of dollars. Madoff was charged, convicted, and sentenced to 150 years in prison. 2 years later, his oldest son committed suicide by hanging himself. During the 1990s, while President Bill Clinton was leading the nation, it was said that America went through the greatest prosperity in history. On the other hand, did it? You see, the stock market soared and Wall Street investment bankers made millions. But it was not real. It was based on a .com IPOs that were based on potential and not performance. This is a mirage of prosperity, folks. And after people bought billions of dollars of .com corporation stocks and invested in IPOs, 3 years later, just after September 11th, shareholders started looking for returns on their investments. The profits were not there. Stock prices started dropping and unearned fortunes were drying up. This affected the housing market. Hello? Which also had been built on soaring property values, which were not really based on proper market growth because it was all based on a potential IPOs which was not based on performance of companies being profitable, which is what you normally do when you launch IPOs, folks. Okay. This did affect the housing market, which also has been built on soaring property values, but were not really based on a proper market growth. Bankers approved loans that had no business approving. Therefore, when the market fell, the cash dissipated. The frauds were exposed. The property values started falling, and the unemployment levels began to increase, and the banks were feeling the pressures of millions of home foreclosures. Because there's no truth. There's no mercy. There's no knowledge of God in the land. And because of the swearing, the lying, the killing, the stealing, and the committing adultery, God said, I have a controversy with the inhabitants of the land. Your cattle are going to die. Your birds will begin falling from the sky. And the fish of the sea, they're going to waste away. They're going to be taken away. Are you saved? We're living in apocalyptic times. You can get my book if you want to. Find out more about it. It's over at paulbegleyprophecy.com, at my website, at paulbegleyprophecy.com. If you'd like to be saved, send me a personal message right here on YouTube. Entitle it, I Want to Be Saved. I want to be saved. I want to be saved. I'll be right back. Big day today.